I'm pleased that today we are voting on S-534, the Protecting Young Victims of Sexual Abuse and Safe Sport Act of 2017. This important legislation protects child athletes from both sexual and physical abuse. Over the past year, the nation was horrified to learn of the decades of abuse that occurred within the USA Gymnastics by Dr. Larry Nassar. The middle name was added by me, Mr. Speaker. Last week, Nassar was sentenced to between 40 and 175 years incarceration after pleading guilty to several counts of sexual assault. Over 150 women and girls gave victim impact statements. How a serial predator like Dr. Nassar could have preyed on so many young girls for a long time in such a flagrant fashion is appalling. Our amateur gymnasts were failed. They were failed by the very people who are supposed to protect them and do no harm, as doctors are supposed to do. In the past weeks, we have not only seen Dr. Nassar brought to justice, but we've also seen many others held accountable for their roles of commission and omission associated with these atrocities. Though we're glad to see justice finally served in this case, we must take appropriate measures to prevent this from occurring again. This bill will do that. Under current law, the Victims of Child Abuse Act requires persons engaged in certain activities and professions on federal lands or in federal facilities to report child abuse. Failure to report could subject such persons to criminal penalties. This bill expands these mandatory reporting requirements to adults working at national governing boards, that is, amateur sports organizations recognized by the United States Olympic Committee, such as USA Gymnastics or USA Tennis, or at sanctioned events. The bill also charters a new organization called Safe Sport, tasking with preventing child abuse within the national governing bodies through education and handling reports of misconduct. Safe Sport will assure these national governing bodies abide by such policies and procedures to assure that predators like Dr. Nassar will never again be permitted to terrorize young athletes with impunity. I'd like to thank Ms. Brooks of Indiana for her hard work on this issue and for assembling a bipartisan team of co-sponsors, protecting our young people, including those that have sacrificed so much to represent the United States, such as athletes, is and should be a bipartisan undertaking. I commend my colleagues for their support, and I urge them to vote in favor of S-543. Mr. Speaker, I have 133 statements, victim impact statements, of young women that were made at this sentencing. And I want to read just a few phrases from some of these strong athletes who had the courage to come forward and tell what Dr. Nassar did to them. The first one is from Donna Markham. Donna's daughter, Chelsea, was an athlete under the supervision of Nassar. She could not give a victim impact statement, and here's why, according to her mother, Donna. In 2009, Chelsea took her own life. She couldn't deal with the pain anymore. Every day, I miss her. It all started with him. Danielle Moore. I hope being reduced to a prison number, she's talking to Nassar, will define you as it defined me for so long. I will no longer be known as a number, and I will be Dr. Danielle Moore. Megan Halachek. As I stand here, I still flash back to the feelings of fear, laying frozen in the office, my sweating, shaking body, adrenaline pumping, painfully clutching the sides of the table, waiting for the sick treatment to be over. Gwen Anderson. I still remember him saying, It's okay. I know you're not used to being touched there, but it will feel better. And here's what Gwen's coach had to say, Thomas Brennan. For the record, go to hell. What you did to everyone else who trusted you and sent girls your way is disgusting, reprehensible, unforgivable, and I reserve the balance. Amanda Barteron. Here's what she said at the sentencing hearing. I refuse to let Larry Nassar take anything more from me. He's already taken enough. Nicole Walker. Here's what she said at the sentencing hearing. I have anxiety and sleep disorders all because of what you, Nassar, did to me. Mr. Speaker, Catherine Gordon said this at the sentencing. Sexual assault is distant until you realize each girl in the news is a broken mirror. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentlelady from Texas and for her support of the legislation, but also her long time working on these issues of victims of crime and her involvement in legislation in the past and in the future on matters such as this. This is not a happy event, Mr. Speaker. This legislation, as Mr. Bishop said, it's unfortunate that Congress has to get involved in this issue. And Congress is going to get involved. And we're going to try to rectify the problems of the past and hold people accountable for crimes in the future. But we are talking about the symbol of everything that's good and right and beautiful about America, these Olympics, the Olympians, and particularly the gymnasts that represent America, the training they go through, the zeal for which they represent our country and work. And yet, while all of that was going on, bad things were happening to them. And our gymnasts that just participated in the last Olympics, who won medals, gold medals, they endured abuse, but yet they went forward to represent our country in the United States Olympics. And people who harm those girls and other athletes, male and female, they need to be held accountable. Not just Larry Nassar, but other people need to be held accountable. This is where law enforcement needs to be involved. You know, I'm a former judge, you know that, and I want to commend the judge in this case, Judge Rosemarie Aquilina, for allowing all of these victims to testify in open court, the courage to come forward and tell very difficult things, things that are difficult for us to even listen to here on the House floor. And they said it, and they wanted the criminal to know what he had done to them impacted them. So I want to congratulate the judge for allowing that, but also the sentence that she imposed. I want to read a few more of the statements, Mr. Speaker. Jessica Rodriguez. USA Gymnastics should be held accountable for each and every one of these acts of abuse they allowed to happen. Taryn Look. I was still a child. I wanted to end my life. Maddie Larson. I was at the height of my career at 19, and the Olympics were just a year away, and I just couldn't take any more of the abuse. I was broken. Larry, my coaches, and USA Gymnastics turned the sport I fell in love with as a kid to my personal living hell. Mr. Speaker, all of these brave Americans came forward and testified about what had happened to them. And we should, they're all Olympians for that. They all deserve the gold medal for what they did for represented our country. and their strength and their courage to testify in open court about what happened to them. The defendant, the criminal, the convicted criminal, wrote a letter to the judge, Mr. Speaker, saying he couldn't take all of this abuse against him for having to listen to all of the statements by the victims. Are you kidding me? He's not the victim. He's the criminal. And he belongs in jail. He belongs in jail, as these victims have said, for the rest of his life, to keep him away from little girls. And I'm glad that that's where he is going, but he is not a victim. His mental abuse, his mental abuse that he occurred or caused on victims of crime, he needs to remember what he had done. And I'm glad that we have finally got this legislation passed in such a quick method. It's a proof, Mr. Speaker, we can work pretty fast, and we also can work in a bipartisan, and we can also work with the Senate, getting legislation that's important to America passed. I want to read one last statement. And I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Speaker, to introduce into the record the 133 written statements that I have, subject to length limitation in the record.
Without objection.
Here's what Natalie Woodard said. I am strong, I am beautiful, I am bold, and no one, especially you, Nassar, can take that away from me. And while standing up here, I realize that I am not alone. And she's not alone. We're on her side. We should be on the side of victims of crime. And this legislation will promote a better atmosphere, a lawful, a good atmosphere for our gymnasts and other athletes to work in. And the people who committed these crimes need to be held accountable. And society has started with the first culprit, Larry Nassar. And there should be more to follow. And that's just the way it is.